Hello and welcome to the Journeymen podcast.
I'm Mark Reeves.
I'm Joseph Corlett.
Join us as we travel from club to club, delving into the stories, tales and myths that help define the ethos and identities of football clubs all around the world.
We take a look at club histories from all angles, whether it be a team's tactical style, superstitious fan rituals, or discussing the best players to grace the shirts.
From our base in Berlin, we'll aspire to give clubs of all sizes a platform to discuss their greatest triumphs and toughest heartbreaks.
We'll take you through fascinating untold stories with tales of heroes, villains, promotions, relegations, and everything in between. And we are back with episode 11 for our second dive into the history and tales of none other than Blackburn Rovers.
In part one, we touched on dingles, cowpits, Mr. Blackburn and raising and lowering coffins. But yeah, we're back to pick up from where we left off. If you remember last time out, we were just introducing a lifelong supporter by the name of Jack Walker, who would change the club's fortunes completely.
So who was Jack Walker? Well, he was a British industrialist and businessman. He'd built his fortune in the steel industry and amassing a personal fortune of over £600 million.
A lifelong Blackburn fan, Jack had always dreamed of taking Blackburn back to where he thought they belonged. Initially on a smaller scale, he'd been quietly sort of putting money into the club for a number of years, more in the sort of background. And in 1988, for example, he even donated building materials for one of the new stands at Ewood Park.
Sounds like an interesting way of getting around financial regulations. Rather than spending money on the wages, you'll spend money on bricks and bags of cement instead.
It's like, I'm sure Todd Bowley would like this kind of thing.
For example, in the past, it was thought that his money had been used to pay for the wages of Ozzy Ardiles and Steve Archibald to join the club back in the 87-88 season.
Yeah, but he'd take full control by January 1991 with the intention of turning Rovers into the greatest and most prosperous club England had seen. He threatened to make Manchester United look cheap, in his words, and further outlined his motivations in a documentary on the club where he said, "I'm only interested in putting Rovers where they should be. Blackburn Rovers is one of the greatest football teams in England. They are one of the founding members and we want them right back at the top."
Ahead of his time with like a behind-the-scenes documentary in 1992 as well.
Welcome to Blackburn.
All or nothing, Blackburn Rovers.
Disney VHS.
Within the first 3 years of his takeover, Walker spent £25 million on new players. This included breaking the British transfer record twice, signing Alan Shearer from Southampton for £3.3 million in 1992 and Chris Sutton from Norwich City for £5 million in 1994, which, despite saying this, breaking transfer records, it is mad that £25 million seems like such a paltry sum now compared to the figures being banded around in nowadays anyway.
It's like what Bournemouth spend on a sort of second choice left back nowadays, isn't it? Ewood Park Ground was also reconstructed at a cost of more than 20 million to give it a capacity of just over 30,000. And nowadays what's now known the Jack Walker stand, providing a lasting tribute. New training facilities in the youth academy are also constructed as well.
So he really was taking care of the club at all levels of the ground, from the ground to the youth academy, players, and even building materials. Everything was getting looked after under his tenure.
One article we couldn't help but laugh where it was referred to him as a local steel baron, which we couldn't help think of the monorail man from The Simpsons coming to town as an issue. But yeah, when he bought Rovers, the season was half completed and they were just above the relegation zone, and they'd not played in the first division since 1966, and their last major trophy had been won in 1928.
Manager at the time, Don Mackay, initially used Walker's funds to make signings which helped ensure Rovers' survival that season, and it built the platform for a promotion challenge in the 91-92 season. Walker would declare his ambition early, maintaining that Rovers should return to the top flight and establish themselves as a top side in England, and eventually even go on to compete with the very best clubs in Europe.
Kenny Dalglish had become manager in October of 1991, and he'd taken a break from football after managing Liverpool at the time of the Hillsborough disaster in April 1989. The disaster which, of course, we all know claimed 94 lives on the day, with the final death toll reaching 97. Dalglish had reached out and attended many funerals of the victims as well, including 4, apparently even in one day. And his presence in this aftermath of the disaster has been described as colossal and heroic. So you see why he took, about a year or so break out of football. But yeah, he would return with Blackburn Rovers.
And by May, Rovers had been promoted to their newly formed Premier League through the playoffs.
This resulting promotion meant they were back for the first time since, like we said, 1966 in the top division, taking their place as a founding member of the brand new Premier League. And it would be in the 1992 pre-season that Dalglish would sign Alan Shearer for that record fee, and a signing that sort of underlined the scale of the ambitions. They're not just there to make up the numbers.
But the biggest news for football fans was the launch of Sky Sports Premier League coverage, and just what could we expect?
Goals, excitement, expectation right now, anticipation.
Live, only on Sky. It's a whole new ballgame.
Despite a serious injury which ruled Shearer out for the half of the season, Dalglish achieved 4th position with the team in the first year of the new Premier League. This was a highly commendable finish, just 13 points behind champions Manchester United.
The following season, Rovers would reduce this gap to just 8 points as United were again crowned champions, with Blackburn this time runners-up. It was their highest league position for almost 80 years. And the season hadn't been without drama, and the club had actually missed out on signing Roy Keane to the eventual champions Man United. Blackburn had agreed a £4 million fee for Keane, who then soon after agreed the contract with the club, but a mistake prevented this from happening. And when the contract had been agreed upon, Dalglish realised they didn't have the proper paperwork done and they couldn't complete the transfer.
That's an incredible story, which I personally didn't know before.
It was on a Friday afternoon, and the office was locked for the weekend, and they had this verbal agreement in place that they would then meet on Monday to complete it. And Fergie basically heard about this, phoned him, and asked would he join them instead of Blackburn. And Ferguson got all the paperwork ready, met up with him on the Saturday, signed him for £3.75 million, the new British transfer record.
Despite missing out on Roy Keane, Dalglish had added England internationals Tim Flowers, David Batty and Graham Lasso to his squad. And during the off-season, Blackburn fans were thrilled after Jack Walker opened his chequebook again for 21-year-old Norwich City striker Chris Sutton. He joined the club for an English record fee of £5 million, following competition from the likes of Arsenal and Manchester United for his signature.
Yeah, so with the most expensive strike partnership in the country, the club's fans were given all the more reason to expect their team to succeed in at least one of the 4 major competitions they would be competing in next season.
So coming into the 94-95 season, the question on everyone's lips was who, if anyone, could stop Manchester United from completing a hat-trick of Premier League titles. A 2-0 defeat by Manchester United in the Charity Shield suggested that Blackburn still weren't quite at that level to compete.
Yeah, although Blackburn did have a number of players injured and missing that day, including the previous season's top goal scorer Shearer, who had a virus from eating seafood. Sounds pretty grim, especially for someone who absolutely despises all seafood.
Mark very much related to this story.
Yeah, but I wish I could also relate to his goal scoring ability as well. But yeah, the league season itself began in fine style, and the SAS strike force of Shearer and Sutton lived up to expectation.
A single Shearer goal brought victory in the first game against Southampton, while Sutton scored his first goal for the club during a 3-0 victory over Leicester City at Ewood Park. A goalless draw against Arsenal was sandwiched between a 4-0 thrashing of Coventry and an emphatic 3-0 victory over Everton. A first league defeat of the season at Norwich was balanced by a thrilling 3-2 victory over Liverpool, and when Manchester United visited Ewood Park, the game was already being billed as a championship decider.
Paul Warhurst gave Rovers an early lead, but a controversial penalty and sending-off decision was given against Henningberg, allowing Cantona to equalise. A sudden dip in form resulted in a 3-2 home defeat against Man City, followed by a 2-goal defeat at Upton Park. With the end of the season fast approaching, Blackburn were struggling to overcome their nerves in this title race.
I just have to have a passing comment on their defeat against Manchester United, in which, Sir Alex Ferguson team getting a dodgy penalty.
Yeah.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought? An Alan Shearer goal in the final home game of the season was enough to see off a dogged Newcastle side, and so everything was hinging on the final game of the season. Rovers with a 2-point advantage travelled to Anfield to face Dalglish's former club, Liverpool, while Manchester United, on the back of 3 consecutive wins, were away to West Ham.
3 points today gives them the title for the first time in 81 years, whatever Manchester United do at West Ham. 1 more win to write the conclusion to an amazing adventure story that's unfolded in a small Lancashire town in the past 4 years.
An early goal from Shearer put Rovers in the driving seat, and news of an early goal for West Ham had the Blackburn fans dancing with delight.
Good ball, Alan Shearer, magnificently done! Just when it was needed most. On the 20-minute mark, they have the lead.
Liverpool, with only pride to play for, began to take control of the match. Barnes equalised for the home side as news filtered through that Brian McClare had also levelled for United. 1 more goal and the trophy would be heading back to Old Trafford.
But West Ham goalkeeper Ludek Miklosko had other ideas and pulled off a string of fine saves to deny Sir Alex Ferguson's side. A late Jamie Redknapp strike for Liverpool also piled on the agony for the Rovers fans.
The police are all out, the stewards are all out. The jury's still out in the championship race. Oh my God! It's in! And it's a fantastic goal for Liverpool. Now even Kenny doesn't know, the man who knows everything about football. Magnificent from Jamie Redknapp. Tim Flowers couldn't keep it out. What a goal. But the news is coming in from Upton Park And what happens here will not matter, because Manchester United could not win. They have drawn at West Ham, and I've never seen a manager happier when his team has just conceded a goal.
But the Blackburn team celebrated on the pitch at Anfield despite losing 2-1. Manchester United finished 1 point adrift.
They're losing this game and they're hugging each other in delight. David Ellery calls a halt at Anfield. Liverpool have beaten Blackburn Rovers, and it doesn't matter, because Blackburn Rovers are champions.
Blackburn were champions of England for the first time in 81 years, their first major trophy for 67 years. And this was also the first time in the Premier League era that a trophy wasn't lifted by Man United. And, you know, Jack Walker, just literally 3 years earlier or so, had said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be to the top. We're going to make Man United look cheap, and we're going to batter them. We're going to do this. We're going to be playing. And they've done it already, which is like, it's pretty wild.
I'm also imagining as well the Liverpool fans in that Anfield Stadium watching. Yeah, fair enough, Liverpool probably would have wanted to have won the league, but seeing a team deny Manchester United a hat-trick of league titles was probably maybe a nice sight, a better sight to see, rather than, you know, if your team can't win it, at least denying Manchester United at that time was probably about as good as it could get. But remarkable that Jack Walker had managed to put together a side. To be fair, he'd pulled out the chequebook, he'd thrown down the cash, and, you know, there's been many, many examples in modern history of football where getting out the chequebook doesn't really result in any tangible success. However, fair play to Jack Walker here. He was one of the first of a kind, a pioneer in some sorts for throwing the money at it, and it's worked. They've toppled the mighty Manchester United at their very peak at this time.
And all of it done because this was his team, and he wanted to give something back and take his team back to the very top, which, yeah.
Very much a lost kind of genre of owner now, of the kind of local man done
The
good.
local businessman, like, yeah, it's very true, yeah. But yeah, a single point separated the two sides, for which more than half the season enjoyed a really big gap between themselves and the rest of the league, despite the likes of Forest, Liverpool, Newcastle looking like title contenders in like the first 2 or 3 months of the season. The title meant that Dalglish was only the 4th manager in history to lead 2 different clubs to top flight league championships in England, after Tom Watson, Herbert Chapman and Brian Clough, something that's still never been matched again since then as well.
And it was a clean sweep of awards. Kenny Dalglish winning Premier League Manager of the Year for guiding Blackburn to the title, and Alan Shearer winning both the Golden Boot and the PFA Players Player of the Year as nominated by his, well, fellow professionals.
They were fired to the title by Shearer and Sutton's combined 49 goals between them. And they also, in the PFA Team of the Year as well, they also had Tim Flowers, Graham Lasser, Colin Hendry, Tim Sherwood, Sutton and Shearer, all in the team, 6 players in the team as well. And yeah, and like I said, Jack Walker's dream had come true. Within 5 years of buying the club, he'd taken them from struggling in the old 2nd division to champions of England. Just, yeah, what an amazing rise.
When you think as well, stretching back into our first episode, from cow pits and players...
Back to the very top.
Players having to hide whether or not they were professional or not, to all the way to being the champions of England, is definitely a mighty rise.
And even if you just, like, you compare this from when Dalglish had first joined the club from a few years ago, and he said when he first came in, he used to go on his assistant Ray Harford's shoulders to put the nets up. But this was part of the evolution. We were just normal people that would hopefully do well at our job and do well for the club. He said that the first season they got into the Premiership, the lads were turning up and asking, what do we do with our training gear? And I said, you need to take it home. Shearer was taking his training gear home for his wife to wash. If he could do it, so could everybody else. So it's still like, everything's still in motion of becoming this top club, and it's like it's still being run very old school at that point.
After achieving this unprecedented success, Kenny Dalglish would actually move upstairs into the position of Director of Football at Blackburn Rovers. He would be succeeded in the dugout by his assistant Ray Harford, who guided Blackburn to a 7th place finish in the following season.
As far as turning points go, the moment that Dalglish stepped down was a pretty big one, obviously, for Blackburn. He later admitted that the decision was far from easy. He said his decision was an act out of the appreciation for the work that Harford had done during his time at Ewood Park. He said it was emotional. You don't make a decision without emotion. It wasn't an easy decision, but Ray deserved his chance. He was a brilliant coach, and I felt like he deserved his shot at management. So although it wasn't easy, I felt it was the right decision.
Emotion was never far away when Dalglish describes his time at Ewood Park, and it's why he always still enjoys talking about Rovers now. Adding to this, with the emotional turmoil and trauma he suffered during both the Heysel and Hillsborough disasters, it's remarkable for him to have overcome those periods and achieve amazing success at Blackburn and throughout the rest of his footballing career.
In his 4 years as manager at Ewan, a bond was formed that will never be broken. And although under Ray Halford the club could not retain their title, Shearer again, now in a 38-game season as a Premier League top goal scorer with 31 goals in 35 games.
The previous season's first-place finish had also seen the club enter the Champions League. Shearer's only goal in 6 full Champions League games was a penalty in a 4-1 victory against Rosenborg BK in the final fixture, and Blackburn finished 4th in their group, failing to progress to the next stage.
In the summer of 1996, Shearer was the top goal scorer at Euro 96 and was linked with a move to a host of leading English and continental clubs. But the main talk in the national media was that Shearer would join local rivals Manchester United. By this point, he'd scored 130 goals in 171 appearances for Rovers since joining in all competitions, with 112 of those coming in the Premier League.
During this time, he was described in The Guardian as, he is a classic working-class sporting hero. Everything a legendary English centre-forward should be. As a striker, he comes close to fitting the Roy of the Rovers fantasy than anyone else. Jack Walker and the Lancashire Telegraph consistently dismissed rumours of Shearer's departure or the fact that he would be heading across to Manchester. Local journalist Peter White stated the club should never be forgiven should Shearer be allowed to join Manchester United.
They would never be forgiven if they let Shearer go to the club Rovers love to hate. Fans might just live with a move to Barcelona or Milan, but not to that lot, was his words. And Alex Ferguson later expressed his anger over his failure to sign Shearer from Blackburn, and he stated, "I had a gut feeling that wouldn't happen simply because Jack Walker hates Manchester United."
I mean, when you've given Sir Alex Ferguson that kind of impression, that surely shows you must hate Manchester United. I'm kind of imagining on at that time the kind of inquiry fax from Manchester United. Maybe they send something over in the machine like, oh, what type of figure would you be thinking? And just send back like a middle finger.
Just wiping his ass with it.
Adding to this transfer saga, John Hall, the then Newcastle chairman, also would continue to reiterate this rhetoric that Walker did not want to sell Shearer to Manchester United.
Yeah, Martin Edwards confirmed Ferguson's attempts to sign him had been blocked by Rovers, and ultimately Shearer would move to hometown club Newcastle United, managed by his hero Kevin Keegan as well, for a then world record fee of £15 million.
The equivalent of that fee in today's money would be £36 million. However, the football industry has exploded beyond the inflation rate of the Bank of England, with football financial experts arguing that the Bank of England's inflation calculator isn't really accurate anymore. Using other methods, that factor of global explosion of football transfers, Shearer's estimated equivalent value in today's money is actually £222 million.
Yeah, which is, I think that puts it into context when you have this adjusted figure to what that transfer fee would be now, and then you see it on a list. Is Shearer's 2019 validated equivalent, which is 220 million, in comparison to the other top transfer records. So where you've got Shearer 222 million, Neymar 198 million, Mbappe 163, João Felix 112. It really puts it into context of how big that transfer was at the time. And also the fact that they was just like, yeah, this can happen and it will be this huge transfer, but Man United aren't paying that money for him. They can fuck off.
We will. Despite these huge sums of money being thrown around, there is still space for petty vigilance.
Yeah. I mean, when you're Jack Walker and you're worth like 700 odd million anyway, I'd be like, well, yeah, fuck off. Like, what are you going to do?
Maybe throw in some bricks and I might start listening to it. Despite these astronomical transfer figures, a poor start would be incoming from the 96-97 Premier League campaign that saw Harford resign in the late of October, with the club bottom of the division, having failed to win any of their first 10 games.
Yeah, Dalglish would later reflect on his decision and Harford's time as manager. Quite good, he says, "You make decisions all the time in your life. For me, I thought it was the right time to move up and let Ray have a go and give Ray as much help as I could. I was caught between helping him, but I never went to pre-season training because I thought they needed to get used to Ray being the manager, so I stayed away. I should have been closer to try and help, but I didn't want to offer in case he thought I was trying to belittle him, even though I don't think he would have. So maybe I was a little bit stupid, but if he needed me, I was always there to give help, but maybe he thought he couldn't ask or didn't want to. It was stupid really, both decisions. My decision to move up, and then when I was in there, I could have done more to help him." So yeah, it was a pretty bold and I think even a shocking decision to happen even back then.
It just sounds like a really sticky situation for both of them. Like both of them simultaneously probably, how do we deal with this kind of change in dynamic, as well as also then you've got to think every single player off the back of the success, Champions League nights to come, and all these little kind of decisions that would then are like, do I ask Kenny about this transfer? And Kenny simultaneously, do I go to the training ground? Do I not go to the training ground? Do I go in the box or do I go on the bench? And all these type of little decisions that I'm sure eat away at both sides of this divide here. And unfortunately, it just seemed to, in hindsight, it seems like it just didn't work for any part of this, whether it be the club, the manager, or the sporting director. And
especially, you've also, a huge thing as well, you're doing all that and you no longer have Shearer as well. It's also like a huge thing as well.
You might have the equivalent of 200 million in the bank, but you can't replace those goals. A relegation would look like a real possibility with just 2 seasons after winning the league.
After an abortive attempt to bring in Sven-Goran Eriksson as manager, long-serving coach Tony Parks took over as manager for the rest of the campaign and narrowly steering the side to survival. And that summer, the manager's job was taken by Roy Hodgson, who joined the club from Inter Milan.
The appointment of the highly regarded manager halted the slide as the 97-98 season ended with Rovers in 6th place and back in Europe, so quite a turnaround from relegation into Europe. New players would be recruited during the 98 close season, with Rovers paying a club record fee for £7 million for Kevin Davies.
The 98-99 season began with the club full of optimism. Man United and Blackburn were the only 2 clubs to have accumulated over 400 Premier League points, and people fully expected Rovers to be back at the sharp end of the table, but nobody would see what was to come.
Davies' signing would not be a success, and as the club's form on the field declined, Roy Hodgson's position became under threat. Hodgson was sacked in December, less than an hour after a 2-0 home defeat by bottom side Southampton, a result that locked Rovers into the relegation zone.
Roy was replaced by Brian Kidd. His arrival brought a short-lived respite from the poor run, but the revival could not be sustained, and Rovers' stint in the Premier League had come to an end. So close to after winning the title to then just shows how quickly things can change and turn in football.
Observing this in hindsight, you've got to think that whilst, yes, the money being thrown around and signing some top players like the likes of Alan Shearer and Chris Sutton definitely made an impact, you reflect on what they were saying about how the operations behind the scene were still quite amateur, still quite basic. And you've got to think that, yes, whilst the money was there and provided that success, they clearly didn't maybe have that same structure the likes of a Manchester United or a Liverpool probably did to kind of maintain that success over the long term, and that was probably something that could have maybe been improved in hindsight, I would guess.
And when you're at that, haven't been sustained in the top division for so long, and then it only takes a couple of wrong managerial appointments or, I don't know, bad luck with injuries and selling players and a new signing not working out, so then all of a sudden you find yourself going back down to the second division.
I mean, Blackburn Rovers are definitely not the only club to have sold their superstar striker or superstar player and then immediately have an absolute drop in form. I'm thinking of Gareth Bale at Spurs and Luis Suarez at Liverpool, for example, both teams having a massive drop off. Maybe not to the same level as relegation, but the same general idea is theirs, that they can try and replace them, but no, it's tough to replace these superstar players when they come around to your club.
Tony Parks would once again take temporary charge of the Blackburn first team, spending 4 months at the helm, before Graham Souness would accept the offer to manage the club in the March of 2000. And around this time, a major breaking story was the news that Jack Walker was suffering from health problems. An official statement released in April said that he had left hospital and was recuperating at home. And in June, the story resurfaced after another bout of newspaper speculation.
Shortly after the start of the new season came the news that all Rovers fans had been dreading, as the death of Jack Walker was announced in the August of 2000. The following statement was released by the club in tribute to the man who'd guided Rovers back to the big time. No tribute from us, no matter how long or detailed, could ever do justice to Mr. Walker's achievements here at Ewood Park. Jack Walker was this football club's #1 supporter in every possible sense. His love for Rovers knew no boundaries, and his loyalty and commitment could never be brought into question. His remarkable drive and determination changed the face and fortune of the club, culminating in the ultimate prize in the spring of 1995, when we were crowned champions of the Premier League. Throughout his illness, Mr. Walker was always adamant that Blackburn Rovers should regain a place in the top flight this season, and we will do everything within our power to turn that into reality over the next coming months.
Blackburn being Blackburn, the national papers didn't take the guy seriously, and I'll never forget the time when he tried to buy Gary Lineker, and Tottenham didn't take him seriously. Lineker's agent didn't take him seriously. They thought it was all a publicity stunt. The fact of the matter is that Jack Walker could have bought Tottenham, never mind Gary Lineker, and people did take him seriously very quickly.
The night of Rovers' Worthington Cup tie against Rochdale at Spotland gave a touching glimpse of how ordinary football fans felt about him after an impeccably observed minute's silence. But fans of both clubs gave a prolonged standing ovation in his memory, and football fans everywhere recognised that Mr. Walker was a true fan at heart.
Fittingly, the club did Jack proud by returning to the Premier League after a much improved season, finishing second behind Fulham. Rovers in the 2000-01 league season hadn't really taken off until Craig Hignett made a belated debut for the club after suffering injury problems. In an attempt to add more grit to his team, Souness signed veteran Mark Hughes from Everton. The Welsh international coach enjoyed a dream debut, scoring twice in a 3-2 victory over Tranmere Rovers.
Yeah, and Hignett's presence galvanised Rovers into a run of 6 consecutive league victories as they moved into the playoff places and closed the gap on the automatic positions. By the time of their 125th anniversary fixture against Wolves, Rovers' fortunes were on the up and the return to the Premier League no longer appeared to be beyond the bounds of possibility.
The season provided many highlights, such as the crushing of arch rivals Burnley in the league fixture at Ewood Park, the emergence of Matt Jensen as a consistent goal scorer, and the continued development of David Dunn into a quality goal-scoring midfielder.
Yeah, and it was top goal scorer Matt Jansen who headed the winning goal at Preston to finally confirm them back in the Premier League. Club going through an awful time and losing such a big figure and such a monumental figure, but doing him proud, like we said, of getting back to the top league of where he would want them to be.
And it's an interesting contrast in the fact that they lost an important figure, in a playing figure obviously, in Alan Shearer so recently as well, and had suffered the consequences, but then they managed to galvanise behind the passing of Jack Walker in kind of an amazing way. However, despite climbing back into the top tier of England, it would be a bit of a tough start for them back in the Premier League. Just 4 wins out of their first 14 league games, which included 7 draws and 3 defeats. So a bit of a middling start back in the top tier.
Yeah, and they were in deep relegation trouble and occupying third from bottom following this dreadful winter period where they had won 2 and lost 10 in 12 games. The 2 wins seeing them do a double over Charlton Athletic, which must have been so annoying for Charlton at that point, where you see like they can't beat anyone but they've smashed us twice. But during the January window, Blackburn brought in reinforcements in the form of Andy Cole for just under £8 million, breaking their transfer record once again in the process.
Graham Souness inspired his side, bolstered by the arrival of Cole, to a considerable turnaround in form, seeing them win 6 in their final 12 games, which saw them climb up to 10th place in the final table. The club also managed to win the League Cup despite their early season league troubles, with a 2-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur in what was Rovers' first appearance in the competition's final.
And an interesting quirk of this final was that Tottenham were forced to produce a one-off yellow shirt when the Football League decided both of their home and away shirts, respectively white and light blue, clashed with Blackburn's blue and white home kit. Blackburn would open the scoring with a goal from Matt Jansen, then Christian Ziege would equalise for Spurs, and then Andy Cole would get the winner in the 68th minute with a typical instinctive strike.
King wanted 3 touches, could let in Cole! Andy Cole has done it for Blackburn!
I'd imagine for most Blackburn fans, his record transfer fee was paid off instantly there by bringing some silverware back to the club.
Yeah, and keeping him up as well.
This cup triumph secured UEFA Cup football for the following season, but the club's fans were left wondering whether it could have been achieved automatically had it not been for the club's dismal winter period. Within 2 months of arriving at Rovers, Andy Cole had collected a League Cup winners' medal and scored the winning goal in the final against Spurs, who were managed by the former England manager and open critic of Cole, Glenn Hoddle.
Yeah, and the victory meant that in the space of 7 seasons, Cole had won all 4 domestic trophies, plus a European trophy. And he ended the season with a total of 18 goals in all competitions, 5 for Man United and 13 in just 20 matches for Blackburn. Yes, talk about an impact.
At the end of the season, striker Mark Hughes retired at the age of 38 after playing a career spanning 22 years that yielded 2 league titles, 4 FA Cups, a Cup Winners' Cup and 3 League Cups. But we'll be coming back to him very, very shortly. The following season, Rovers finished 6th to qualify for the UEFA Cup for a second season running.
I think one of the things that stood out to me the most when we were sort of researching this kind of era was like with Souness there, where he managed to turn it around incredibly, did some work in the transfer window, saved the club. But just trying to put that into the context of modern football, of imagine if you lost 10 in 12 games at any level of football now, how many managers could possibly survive that? It just doesn't happen anymore, does it?
Ruben Amorim is giving it a good run for his money.
Yeah, to be fair, yeah. He's clearly got some dirt on someone. I don't know how he still has a job, but yeah.
But despite that, they wouldn't make it into the group stage of the UEFA Cup that season, as they would be dumped out in qualifying by Turkish side, and bear with me here, Glencler Beligili. Or from Ankara. So I apologise to the Turkish listeners out there, but yeah, fair play. I mean, you knocked out Blackburn, so fair play to you, but sadly for Blackburn, they did not get some fun European away days, sadly.
And Souness left just after the start of the 04-05 season to take charge, and maybe didn't fancy pronouncing a name like that again. But yeah, he was replaced by a Welsh national coach and former player, Mark Hughes. So he's back at Blackburn now as manager. But before leaving for Newcastle, Souness had signed a player who will be very fondly remembered by many in Morton Gams Pedersen, who would go on to make 349 appearances and score so many great goals that I think everyone can remember from their at least for me, your childhood growing up seeing that.
Mark Hughes would in fact quit the Welsh national side to become Blackburn manager in the Premier League, the last club he played for. His key aim was to keep Blackburn clear of relegation, which he succeeded in doing whilst also taking the club to an FA Cup semi-final for the first time in over 40 years, which is really a relic of their history from Part 1 where they were just dominating the FA Cup.
Yeah, true.
Unfortunately, he would lose to the eventual cup winners with Arsenal.
Yeah, and his lack of experience in club management showed, and the club were bottom of the Premier League after 14 games played, but he soon rallied the team to finish comfortably clear of relegation in 15th, and technically as close to a relegation spot as they were to a UEFA Cup place in terms of points. Hughes would sign striker Craig Bellamy, who had played with him for Wales, from Newcastle, in the hope that the Tyneside club's out-of-favour striker could fire Rovers to a higher place next season.
And it would seem to work, as in his second season he helped Blackburn finish inside the top 6 of the Premier League and subsequently qualified for the UEFA Cup once again, beating teams such as Chelsea, Manchester United. They did the double over Manchester United, which I'm sure Jack Walker was probably looking down and going, yeah.
I bet he was loving that.
He was loving that. And they even beat Arsenal en route to qualifying in that position.
Yeah, and after just missing out on the League Cup final, his team sealed their spot in Europe by defeating champions 1-0 at home. In May 2006, Hughes and assistant Mark Bowen signed new 3-year contracts to remain at Blackburn until the summer of 2009.
After qualifying for Europe, Rovers signed South African striker Benny McCarthy from FC Porto as a replacement for the departed Craig Bellamy, who left Rovers for Liverpool after scoring 13 Premier League goals in his only season. A lovely little throwback there to our FC Porto episode, Benny McCarthy there. Flashback to him scoring at Old Trafford again. I'm sure Jack Walker would also enjoy.
Just anything that fucks up Man United. It's absolutely. I bet he loves hammering. Yeah, Rovers would finish top of their European group and were drawn against Bayer Leverkusen, losing 3-2 on aggregate. The club was busy during the January transfer window, re-signing David Dunn and adding Stephen Warnock, Christopher Samba and Bruno Berner. I just love hearing some of these names again as well.
In the cup competitions, Rovers would be knocked out of the Carling Cup in the third round. Even just the name the Carling Cup is lovely and nostalgic.
Well, we had Worthingtons a minute ago. I was like...
They defeated Everton, Luton, Arsenal after a replay and Manchester City in the FA Cup. They then faced Chelsea for a place in the final, unfortunately losing 2-1. But Rovers had opportunities to win the match in 90 minutes, but it was German international Michael Ballack who denied them a final appearance with a winner with 11 minutes from time.
Yeah, and Rovers would finish this season 10th in the league, with Benny McCarthy netting 18 league goals, 24 in all competitions. And they also qualified for the Intertoto Cup and drew Lithuanian side FK Vetra.
From one side of the spectrum with nostalgic, beautiful names to then just something completely left field from Lithuania, which, to be honest, I respected itself as well.
But it's like your Turkish team a minute ago. At least we can say that one, though.
To prepare for the 07-08 season, Rovers would bring in another one of these lovely names, none other than former Bayern Munich player Roque Santa Cruz.
This era of like football, but in particular this era of just Blackburn squad, I just absolutely loved it. Roque Santa Cruz, and he'd have a fantastic debut season. And Rovers were, at any stage, they were never outside of the top 10 and made their best start to a campaign for over 10 years. Santa Cruz brilliantly shone, scoring 23 goals in all competitions and finishing as the league's 4th top goal scorer behind Cristiano Ronaldo, Fernando Torres and Emmanuel Adebayor, which is pretty good company to be keeping, as Blackburn claimed 7th place in the 07-08 Premier League table with 58 points. He was also voted as Blackburn's player of the season as well.
Yeah, fantastic transfer, but unfortunately this would turn out to be Hughes' final season in charge at Ewood Park. During his spell in charge of Rovers, Hughes' side would be accused of being, in inverted commas, overly physical or, in just matter-of-factly, dirty on multiple occasions, with the club finishing bottom of the Premier League disciplinary table in all 4 seasons of Hughes' seasons in charge, which, to be honest, is a remarkable fact in itself.
It's a great record, though. I don't think I've ever heard someone having that before, where it's like, I don't know, it's top of the assist chart. So this manager, everywhere I go, my team are the most feisty people in the league.
I feel like only the likes of Simeone at Atletico.
Simeone surely is. Although this is a league where like it wasn't that long ago you had people gouging people's eyes out before the Classico. So, but I don't know. But surely Simeone tops that every year.
Mark Hughes would leave Blackburn Rovers and be heading across to Manchester. But not Manchester United. He would be actually heading to Manchester City and replacing Sven-Göran Eriksson in the dugout, which is even stranger considering that Blackburn nearly signed Sven-Göran Eriksson back when they just got their money. So interest was reported from Chelsea as well, who'd also just sacked their manager Avram Grant at the time. So Mark Hughes was definitely a man in demand.
Do you know, now you've said this about Sven-Göran Eriksson, do you not remember he was also involved in Notts County when they randomly got all the money? Do you remember when they signed Sol Campbell and then it all disappeared immediately?
That's a wonderful observation, Mark. Sven is always around.
Fucking hell, he was a clever bloke. And apparently Blackburn had agreed a then world record compensation package with Man City, with Hughes going to them as manager. And he was appointed as head coach in June 2008 on a 3-year contract.
And if Mark Hughes had somehow got a crystal ball and seen into the future somehow and made this decision based on this information, well, he's a genius because just a few months later, in the September of 2008, Manchester City would be taken over by none other than Abu Dhabi United Investment Group, who made large amounts of transfer funds available to Hughes, allowing City to break the British transfer record and sign Robinho from Real Madrid for 32.5 million, which, Abu Dhabi all of a sudden making Jack Walker's transfer funds seem like a little splash in a little puddle there with nearly 10 times the amount available.
Although the thing that, once again, he probably would have found quite funny is, you remember Robinho was bundled on a plane by Real Madrid and he thought, when he was told he couldn't go to Chelsea and he was going to Manchester and he thought he was signing for Man United. I think he had no idea who Man City were, which is also quite funny.
It's in a weird way denying Manchester United once again.
Another player.
The spirit of Jack Walker lives on in so many fascinating ways, isn't it? That's mad to think. But now it's the Manchester City that we all know and we all know today has kind of been created from this.
You nearly said we know and love, and then you're like, no, we don't love them.
Oh, man's up there and say I did backpedal quite furiously then in my own head.
Shit, I don't love them. Nobody loves them. Yeah, and among of the many players that over the next season or so that Hughes would bring to the club, he brought 2 of his ex-Blackburn players with him, including Craig Bellamy from West Ham and Santa Cruz directly from Blackburn for 17.5 million in June 2009.
Come on, Mark, you don't have to do that to Blackburn, do you?
Sorry.
Pillaging his former club, it's just unfair, considering they have all the money in the world. They don't need to go back to Blackburn, of all places. However, just a little shout out to Roque Santa Cruz, who would later appear for the likes of Real Betis and Malaga before heading across the Atlantic to Mexican side Cruz Azul. He would head back to his homeland in Paraguay in 2016 with Olimpia, and most amazingly, at the age of 44 as we record, he is still an active player for Libertad, commonly known as the 3rd biggest team in his homeland in Paraguay. So we just needed to make a shout out there that despite we're talking about this history, him being part of an iconic Blackburn side, and he's still just plugging away, playing in his homeland. Gotta love it.
I actually signed him on Football Manager last year, at the age of whatever he was, 42, 43.
He's got to have some incredible experience stats.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure his finishing was really good, but obviously his physical stuff was in the minus.
Just put him up top and give him the ball. Fox in the box. Mark Hughes would be replaced by Paul Ince, whose first job was to persuade some of the players who'd wanted to follow Hughes or pursue other teams to stay. His tenure started off well with 5 wins in its first 8 games, but a run of just 1 victory in the following 13 matches saw Ince relieved of his duties following a 3-0 away loss at Wigan in the December of 2008.
Yeah, and he'd been at Blackburn only 177 days, and at the time it was one of the shortest reigns of a Premier League manager. And none other than Sam Allardyce was appointed on a 3-year contract, succeeding Ince, who'd left the club with just 3 wins from 17 games. Allardyce's first game in charge was a 3-0 victory over Stoke City at Ewood Park 3 days later, which is also once again just pure Big Sam.
Yeah, fair play to Sam Allardyce for coming in, classic firefighter style Sam Allardyce.
Make you hard to beat.
Yeah.
I love that first game he just turns up and beats Stoke 3-0 as well. It's
This would become the first game of a 9-game unbeaten run. He strengthened the team by spending $2 million on Sunderland winger El Hadj Diouf and brought in defender Gaël Givet on loan from Marseille.
Yeah, and under Allardyce, Robert Lewandowski famously almost joined Blackburn, but the transfer was thwarted by the volcano eruption and ash cloud in Iceland, with the Pole heading to Borussia Dortmund instead. So what could have been with
Mark tactically avoiding pronouncing the actual name of that volcano.
That's
there, but
just not a word. It's just not a word.
But it's one of those, again, what could have been if Robin Lewandowski had turned up at Ewood Park.
And instead you got Nikola Kalinic.
Allardyce finished the first season in charge with a 0-0 draw against West Bromwich Albion and a final league position of 15th, a run that included just one loss in their last 11 games. Allardyce's first full season in charge saw them finish a very respectable 10th place in the league as cup competitions once took centre stage. A great highlight being the League Cup 5th round, with Blackburn being handed a home tie against none other than Mark's beloved Chelsea.
Yeah, and it was a game that started at a fast and frenetic pace, with both teams showing a willingness to attack. Kalinic would shoot wide under pressure from Paulo Ferreira shortly before his 9th minute opener, a well-constructed goal that saw Morten Gams-Pedersen playing Pascal Chimbonda, who in turn drilled the ball low across the face of the goal for Kalinic to slot home.
You're just taking the piss out of Kalinic there, and now he's scoring against Chelsea.
He scores again in a minute.
Chelsea were unusually wasteful in front of goal and struggled to create a clear-cut openings. Even so, Solomon Kalou, Mikel, Joe Cole, Michael Ballack and Yuri Zhirkov all either forced saves from Paul Robinson or missed the target before the break. Kalou's miss was the most glaring, heading wide from just 6 yards out.
And Ancelotti would make a bold triple substitution at half-time, introducing Jeffrey Brumer, Gael Kakuta and Didier Drogba. And it looked a good decision after being on the pitch for just 3 minutes. Drogba climbed above Ryan Nelson to head home Florent Malouda's cross.
4 minutes later, Chelsea took the lead with Zhirkov collected a loose ball and released Kalou, who closed in on goal before slotting the ball home beyond Robertson. Rovers levelled, however, in the 64th minute when Kalinic attempted to head Brett Emerton's deflected cross at the near post. The striker didn't appear to get anything on the ball, but regardless, it did enough to distract Hilario and the ball went in at the far post.
Yeah, and then Chelsea were reduced to 10 men when Kalou limped off due to the triple change at half-time, and they were unable to bring on a replacement. And Rovers thought they'd snatched a dramatic victory in injury time, but Benny McCarthy's effort was ruled out for offside. Kalinic then forced a save from Hilario, but Chelsea survived to take the match to extra time.
Rovers' pressure eventually told when the team regained the lead from the penalty spot early in extra time. Zhirkov clearly fouled substitute David Hoylett, and McCarthy sent Hilario the wrong way from the penalty spot. Paulo Ferreira equalised with just about the last action of extra time with a neat finish from a tight angle after Robertson had flapped at an early cross.
And Kakuta would miss the crucial spot kick as Rovers won the shootout 4-3 to seal a place in the last four. And the 18-year-old struck the ball straight at Paul Robinson, who earlier had sensationally tipped Michael Ballack's spot kick onto the post.
To take this penalty shootout to sudden death. If he misses, Rovers win. Kakuta steps up, Robinson saves, and Rovers are into the semi-finals of the Carling Cup. Paul Robinson, the villain in the last minute of extra time, the hero in the penalty shootout, and Big Sam's side are 2 games from Wembley.
Gael Kakuta, obviously more famous, missing this penalty and also getting Chelsea a massive transfer ban. Wasn't necessarily his fault, it was all the people and Chelsea around him and everything. But yeah, he's probably way more famous than that. And then all the trouble Chelsea got in for this guy, for then this was the only real thing of note he did in a Chelsea shirt.
This is his first action after returning back from the transfer ban. And missed the penalty, and Rovers had made it through to the next round of the Cup. And in the semi-finals, Rovers would meet Aston Villa, who'd already knocked them out of the FA Cup that season. And unfortunately, they did the same thing again in the League Cup with a remarkable 7-4 win on aggregate with 2 sensational cup ties. And with these cup matchups in the league, that meant that Blackburn and Villa faced each other 5 times in one season. So they really must have become, bloody hell, not Villa again.
Yeah, that must be so annoying. Imagine seeing the draw again and be like, we've got to fucking go there again. Especially the FA Cup one where it's 2 legs as well.
Oh, God. With the upcoming season, Rovers would see a change in ownership. And so from the glory days of Jack Walker and money being thrown around, buying some of the best players, pissing off Manchester United at every possible opportunity, we turn to the change of ownership with Indian conglomerate, the Venkis, taking over the club.
The taste that brings the English Premier League team, Blackburn Rovers, to India. Blackburn Rovers, proudly owned by Venkis.
Yeah, and the Venkis bought Blackburn Rovers from the Jack Walker Trust in November 2010 for $23 million. The trust had been established in the name of the former owner and local steel magnate Jack Walker after his death in 2000. The trust had reduced investment in the club after Jack Walker's passing over the years, and they were seeking a new owner to provide investment and support.
It's definitely something that you can notice when, for example, they were buying El Hadji for just a mere £2 million under Sam Allardyce's
so many years later, yeah.
It's like all of a sudden £2 million would be fitting back in Alan Shearer's day. Let alone nowadays when 30 million were being thrown around for some players. The Venkis tried to make an immediate statement by attempting to sign Ronaldinho from AC Milan, with reports suggesting a 3-year deal worth around 20 million was on the table for the Brazilian.
First things first, have you managed to do any business? Where are you in the market, as it were?
We're quiet at Bryn. We went a little, we're inquiring about players and seeing if they're available.
The indications from Brazil overnight are that Ronaldinho's going to Grêmio, I think, aren't they? That appears to be the case.
Well, I don't know. It seemed to go a little bit quiet for us, and then it seemed to be back on yesterday. So we'll see how that progresses today, and hopefully it goes in the positive way. If it doesn't, then we'll move on and we'll go for another target.
So never say never on that.
Never, no, still on.
And David Beckham, have you made any progress there?
No, that one has gone quiet, and I don't know where David will end up playing for a couple of months. I think, but I don't think he's going to be coming to the Northwest, so obviously that rules us out.
However, Ronaldinho probably wisely chose to return to his homeland in Brazil and join Flamengo instead.
Imagine Ronaldinho at Blackburn. I can still remember all of the stuff at the time about
I mean, I'm not sure if they would have crossed paths, but there is some weird world out there where Robert Lewandowski and Ronaldinho are maybe a front two.
Being managed by Allardyce.
None of that samba flair, none of that jogger bonito. Just get it up long, boy, please. None of this messing around with your dancing. Black boots.
Yeah. Without going too in depth straight away, but the main things people outside of Blackburn will remember when they hear Venky, obviously it's classic bad owners, but this Ronaldinho story, and then of course we can't not mention it. I'm sorry, Blackburn, we have to at least mention it. Is the famous chicken advert? That's what most people will immediately associate with it.
Just a lot of Blackburn players kind of awkwardly acting as they look like they enjoy some fried chicken or...
Meanwhile, just in the background, it's over and over again, Rovers, but it's not Blackburn Rovers fans singing the Rovers bit, which also was a very weird creative decision with that advert.
Even more strangely, to add to all the chaos, the new owners immediately sacked manager Sam Allardyce and replaced him with first-team coach Steve Keane, initially on a temporary basis. But by the January of 2011, he had been awarded a full-time contract until June of 2013.
Yeah, and Keane's appointment was full of controversy since his agent, Jerome Anderson, had played a major role in advising the Venkies during the takeover of the club in the preceding months and was also still heavily involved. Allardyce would later receive a substantial but undisclosed damages settlement from Keane after Keane was recorded in a bar in Hong Kong falsely alleging that Allardyce had been sacked from his post because he was a crook.
Which, in hindsight, considering Sam Allardyce was then sacked from being England manager for
because he was a crook.
Maybe Steve Keane was...
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. In a video game, that type of thing, allegedly. I don't know. It all seems... Well, he was sacked from the England manager because he was speaking to agents about how to get around fees and player rules and all this type of thing. So that was definitely some dodgy dealing.
But it's just interesting that Steve Keane would be saying stuff like that when his whole appointment is surrounded by basically he had this dodgy agent that was also doing all this other dodgy stuff.
Just a whole bunch of dodgy, allegedly crooked men probably all trying to not get backstabbed or backstabbing other people by the sounds of it.
That Jerome Anderson guy is actually allegedly is very, very dodgy and was involved in the John Obi Mikel transfer.
Oh, God.
He was involved with Man City with Thaksin Shinawatra. He was involved with the Venkies.
A remarkable CV, one could say. Remarkable in one sense. I don't really want to say anything else now because I feel like...
Yeah. All allegedly.
All allegedly. So despite this kind of mysterious start to Keane's tenure at Blackburn Rovers, he did start brightly as a manager, but 10 games without a win saw Rovers dragged into relegation trouble once again. A kind of everlasting kind of theme of this period.
Yeah, and a 15th place finish was secured with a 3-2 win over Wolves on the final day of the 10-11 season. And in November 2011, Blackburn confirmed that Keane had signed a new contract with improved terms, despite the club being in bottom place in the league. This came despite Keane's comments less than a week earlier stating, yes, there have been discussions about a new contract, but I've told the owners this is an inappropriate time to conclude any new contract discussions.
Like, make it obvious, lads. If you're going to do some sort of like dodgy dealing and like this type of thing, like, yeah, the worst performing member of the team has been given a new contract. I think in any workplace you'd be a bit like, huh, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's absolutely bizarre. Like, it's all so strange. The opening half of the season saw Rovers win just 3 times as the team struggled at the wrong end of the table. They did improve as the season went on, but they'd left themselves with way too much to do. And a 1-0 home defeat at the hands of Wigan Athletic saw fears realised as they were relegated back to the Championship for the first time in 10 years.
In the same video that Keane made his remarks about Allardyce, he also predicted Blackburn would finish in the top half of the Premier League and win the Carling Cup. So, I mean, good thing he can't be sued for that, because...
Yeah, that is fact. The club were instead relegated from the Premier League amid scenes of huge unrest and protest against him and the Venkies.
So, my word, what an absolute car crash all of this is.
Yeah.
Keane had been a hugely unpopular appointment since being promoted, which I feel is just a radical opposite to usually how we talk in this about legendary managers. Keane being a hugely unpopular appointment since being promoted from within to replace Allardyce. And despite repeated calls for his removal by the fans, the Venkies continued to stand by him. What did Keane have on these guys? What did Keane have on this? The secret formula to their chicken or something? What is going on here? What is going on?
And at the start of the 12-13 season, he was given a chance by the owners to win promotion from the Championship and kept his job. And despite the drop, he was able to spend £8 million on Championship goal machine Jordan Rhodes. At the time, this fee was a record transfer for a Championship team and shattered the previous record.
As well as adding to that, Leon Best and Danny Murphy would also join the club too. As well as, remarkably, former Portugal international veteran Nuno Gomes, who also joined the club on a free, as well as 5 other Portuguese players from FC Porto, Sporting Lisbon and Portimao.
And Gomes in 2021, we found this quote of him from a couple of years ago speaking about how much he loved at Blackburn. We include this just because we found it quite funny because he mentions Manchester a little bit too much. Like, I moved to Manchester when I joined Blackburn. It wasn't far from the club. I really enjoyed my stay there. In fact, while I wouldn't say I regretted early moves in my career, it did make me think I could have perhaps played in England sooner. I moved over with my wife, who got a job in Manchester. There was nice restaurants and theatres in Manchester for my family to visit. We used to always go to concerts at the MEN Arena. We went to see Pink one time. I remember that night. That was my wife's choice. We had a lot of fun in Manchester. he managed to speak at length about how much he loved playing for Blackburn, and all he did was talk about going to see Pink in Manchester and going to restaurants in Manchester. I think basically at the end of his career, he just wanted a city break for like a year.
Mentioning Manchester 4 times in a space of 1 paragraph. And yeah, not to harp on it too much, but Jack Walker surely must have been turning in his grave at this point.
Yeah, let alone what the fucking Venkies are doing to the club. Yeah, and despite all their protests, the Venkies said they had no intention of relinquishing the club. They never gave any indication they would replace Keane. And this strange situation appeared that the only contact the club has with its distant owners was like through him at the time. So he was literally like their spokesman, their communicator. It was all so strange.
Ultimately, though, pressure from the supporters who had been calling for the manager's removal for months resulted in Keane's resignation as manager in the September of 2012. And I do remember this at the time because it was one of those things that even as like a relatively uneducated football fan, it was one of those things from the outside looking in, as someone who wasn't remotely like kind of keeping on top of Blackburn, like, how is this guy still in a job? Yeah. Which even now looking back, like many years later, it's still equally as perplexing.
Yeah, if anything, even more.
Yeah. The search for a new manager took Rovers board to an entire month before finally opting for a former Rovers defender, Henning Berg. The choice for an out-of-work manager and football pundit for Norwegian TV surprised many who were calling for an experienced and big-name manager. But to be honest, looking back now, it's completely on brand for the Venkies.
I mean, this is like Football Manager filter by club icons, hire former club icon.
Highest reputation possible.
Yeah, he's like, yes, he was a great player for the club, but it's a very strange choice as manager, which it would prove out to be a very strange and unsuccessful experiment.
A flurry of managerial changes would follow, with 7 full-time managers and 3 caretaker manager spells between 2012 and 2017, which, if you've listened to some of our other pods, whenever any club gets into this kind of place where they're just hiring and firing, I think it's pretty obvious that, my word, there's some problems happening at the club, and it's basically spells danger, relegation, problems and financial turmoil for any club, let alone Blackburn Rovers.
Mm-hmm. And like part of that, like Gary Bowyer had 2 of those caretaker spells and then took over and actually in his full-time spell actually did pretty well, and they eventually did get it right, or at least had some stability towards the end of that time period you just said of from 2017 to 2022 when Tony Mowbray was there, and they had some stability. But yeah, in between that, so like from Steve Keane, you had Eric Black, caretaker, Henning Berg, Gary Bowyer first time, then Michael Apperton, Gary Bowyer again, caretaker, then Gary Bowyer permanent, then Paul Lambert, then Owen Coyle, then Tony Mowbray.
Got to say, I'm looking at the winning percentages here on this little diagram of Henning Berg with a 10% winning ratio. Just that experiment.
That was a disastrous experiment. And his tenure lasted from October 2012 to December 2012.
And then, Gary Bowyer. I'm surprised Gary Bowyer didn't get the job on a full-time basis, because he came in and was unbeaten in his 4 games as caretaker manager. I'm surprised that the Venky's didn't just go, let's stick with this.
Well, and that probably explains why they brought him back another 2 times.
Yeah, to be fair, that makes sense.
May 2017, this would sort of all catch up and result in Blackburn being relegated to League One for the first time in 37 years on goal difference.
In the April of 2018, the club were promoted back to the second tier in a 1-0 win at Doncaster Rovers. As of 2025, this remains the only season any former Premier League champion has competed below the second tier of English football.
Which I think is a pretty fascinating stat. I mean, the only other team that you could see like breaking that or joining that is Leicester at some point.
In recent years, they finished 15th, 11th, 15th, 8th and 7th in the second tier. One little nugget that we couldn't resist mentioning is Deo Zufuic's easily forgotten loan spell in the January of 2022 from Hertha BSC. He only made 6 appearances for Rovers, but has earned a place in our hearts since his performances for our beloved Hertha.
Yeah, we had to sneak that in there, shoehorn that in there. Most Blackburn fans are like, who? It's just 6 appearances for us. They actually did have an option to buy him as well and didn't use it.
Just indulge us a little bit, Blackburn fans. Just indulge us. He's in our hearts here in Berlin. In the 23-24 season, Rovers narrowly avoided relegation on the final day, finishing 19th after a 2-0 win against title winners Leicester City, their lowest finish since promotion back to the Championship in 2018.
One constant, though, through all of these ups and downs has been this much-loved ownership. And November 2025 will actually mark 15 years since the Venky's became the Blackburn Rovers majority owners. And since then, it's been a tough few years at Ewood Park.
Financially, it's not been the wisest investment, as the club continues to lose money on a day-to-day basis and has had to sell key players such as Sammy Smodics and Adam Wharton recently to balance the books.
The Venky's are once again due in court in November as they battle the Indian Ministry of Finance in a case which has been publicly ongoing since 2023. And a topic that has perplexed people for many years has been the question of why have they not sold the club? Why are they still here? There's a recent Football League World article asked Blackburn fan pundit Simon Middlehurst if he had one question to ask the current Blackburn ownership. He actually has 2 questions, which would be, why did you buy the club in the first place? And 2, why don't you sell the club? Why are you still here?
They only really invest to keep the club running, and they make a loss every season. The financial side is really public, and the Venky's have court issues in India about how much money they can invest in their Western businesses, Middlehurst added.
In Football League World concluded that despite the pleas of the Blackburn fan pundit Simon, his hopes of a sale don't look like they're going to come to fruition anytime soon. In April 2025, Venky stated they did not want to sell the club, and even if they did, they hadn't received any legitimate offers to buy Blackburn from them. And there are clear frustrations about how the club is run from the Blackburn fans, as recent big sales haven't been put in to bring in new players for anywhere near those sums anyway. And after that overly positive campaign last season, things are starting to sour once more, as it doesn't seem like the club will be challenging for the playoffs.
It does say something quite mad that, despite all this chaos off the field, that they've still managed to find some nuggets, whether it be sheer luck or just a manager having a good contact with a good player.
Ben Brereton as well.
Yeah, it's mad that they've managed to keep their head above the parapet, so to speak, with some of these great players that they've managed to sell for some money to keep the coffers rolling. And it's also quite interesting to reflect back on how Jack Walker's tenure, in terms of, as we've already mentioned, he was updating the training complex, updating the stadium, and now when you reflect now into the modern day, whilst Ewood Park, in our opinion, is a wonderful traditional ground, it is it is starting to show like its age.
That's the thing that like Walker's legacy, like he built the training ground, he built the stadium, and like all of these things. But Blackburn's like assets now it's all the stuff he built and he created. Yeah, we've just spoke about the Venky's. They're 15 years in charge, and what really is to show for it, apart from advert that was widely ridiculed, a Ronaldinho transfer rumour, relegation, two relegations, is in a way it's quite a sad thing. And it's also in our research that like with the Jack Walker Trust and stuff that also could they have done some better
due diligence,
yeah, of like, because this is what the club is now in 2025.
It's such a far cry for what Walker would have wanted. Yeah. And just for the record, I didn't mean to belittle Ewood Park. I would say in its current state it is a wonderful relic of a kind of past, but unfortunately, obviously for Blackburn Rovers fans, I think they would much prefer to have up-to-date modern facilities that was competing at the high end of either the Premier League or the Championship at this point. But yeah, as ground toppers, I have to say Ewood Park, I was very excited to tick that off 2 seasons ago, looking back now.
And in the meantime, I think Rovers fans will be waiting to see the outcome of this delayed court hearing involving the owners and if it affects the club in any way. Regardless of this cloud hanging over the club, we hope to see a coffin being raised out the ground very soon, and we definitely don't mean the Preston one.
So that brings us to the end of our 2-part series here on episode 11 with Blackburn Rovers. So, Mark, do you want to link us to our next club, our next episode?
Yeah, it's one player that we've already mentioned who plays for our next club, and they play in similar colours to Blackburn Rovers right now, the team that this person plays for.
So yeah, that's everything. This has been the Journeymen podcast. And if you've enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like, give it a share, give us a comment. If you've got any perspectives or any insights into any of the stories we touched on throughout this episode, we'd love to hear them. Get them in the comments below. Give it a rate on Spotify or on your podcast platform of choices. It really helps us in the algorithms. And apart from that, get in touch with us on social media. We're always sharing our ground hopping travels and everything in between, and our giveaways as well. So yeah, if that's everything, I think that's about everything we've got to say here for Blackburn Rovers.
Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.
I've been Joseph Corlett.
I'm Mark Reeves.
See you guys next time.